Hello and welcome to episode 92 of the Blood Brothers podcast. Tonight there are three of us. Hello, Rob and Sean.
Hello there.
I should say three hosts. We're joined by a most excellent guest. Hello, William Shaw.
Hello, very good to be here.
Very nice to have you. How are you?
I'm fine, actually. Yeah. Nice sunny day. Lovely. Spring beginning to happen.
See,
all good.
You can say that because you're down in Brighton.
Yes. Yeah, I'm at a different latitude.
Yeah, you're in sort of Manchestonian.
It's gorgeous here.
We can cut you off, you know. Please, can you tell us? It's Dead Rich that's coming out very soon, and there's so much to talk about.
Yes,
Dead Rich is forthcoming. The Trawlerman's just been. Can you give us a little introduction to William Shaw? I guess.
Oh, to William Shaw. Right. Well, I've been. This is. I'm just coming out to my 10th book, actually. So Dead Rich is my 10th book, which seems remarkable. And so I've been writing that horrible genre name, police procedurals. Which I hate as a name, isn't it? The ugliest name for a genre ever. I've been writing them. I love the genre, I hasten to add. I love it. And I've been writing police procedurals. And the last lot, you mentioned the Trawlerman, that's I think the fourth in the series set in Kent that I've been writing about. But while I was writing that, I was also writing another book simultaneously. I'm friends with the writer Ellie Griffiths, and she seems to write 3 books a year, and I was just really jealous of that. and so I started writing 2 books at the same time, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And because the one wasn't asked for, I could make any kind of book I wanted, and I wrote a thriller instead of a police procedural. It wasn't contracted. And so I let myself sort of loose on trying to write the kind of thriller that when I was a kid, I read all those sort of Alistair MacLean, Hammond Innes, Neville Shute kind of books. And it suddenly struck me they don't really exist. There's sort of thrillers out there now. But the thrillers are always sort of political thrillers or legal thrillers. But that old-fashioned kind of adventure thriller, certainly in Britain, has really taken a bit of a backseat. And so I thought, if nobody's asking for it, when writers go rogue and they write a book out of genre, and it's always a disaster, and the editor always says, no, well, nobody would publish that. I kind of thought, well, nobody's asked for this, and I'm writing another book. So if I write the one I like as well, I like them both, obviously, he said hastily. But if I write this book that I like the idea of, but nobody wants, maybe, I'm not going to lose anything. So I handed it to my agent. She said, this is really interesting. Let's see what we can do with this.
That's fabulous. Really fascinating. And also having, like, if you've been around the block enough with writing what you're being asked to write or what people are buying and everything else, that you also have a sense that if you as a reader go, wait, I haven't seen one of those for a long time, then you're not going to be alone. There's a sort of certain prescience to that.
But don't you think with what so-called psychological fiction is called now, that a lot of writers suddenly thought, hold on, I used to read all these Agatha Christie books and there aren't Agatha Christie books anymore. Why don't I try writing one of those? And of course, I bet the first few came around and the publisher said, well, nobody reads books like this at all. And then, along came, the Paula Hawkins and the first book through, and now that's all they want, it seems. Like publishing's like that, isn't it? It just follows the car ahead, so to speak.
But it's like when you're sort of trying to get shows commissioned on the BBC and everything else, is that people like that, let's make more of that, but it has to be different, so let's make the main character a woman. So it's exactly the same story.
I know, and they like, people like what they don't know they like, if you know what I mean, don't they? Do you know what I mean? That's the classic thing. I can remember I used to work on magazines. They used to have these long focus groups, and they'd tell you which bits of the magazine worked, and you had to do more of that. And you're thinking, no, you don't have to do more of that. You have to do something else, and they might like it even more.
I honestly, these are all the buzzwords that we like talking about on here, William. Truthfully, like we are pretty much anti-pigeonholing in the industry, because we all get put in a neat little box with a little bow on the top, don't we? And it's really nice to step out of that, and I absolutely love that, taking matters into your own hands as well. It must have been so liberating.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was great fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed writing it. It's a book where you don't quite know what you're doing because you have not done that kind of thing before, and it was really good fun. It was great. I mean, the whole thing came from I'd heard a report from the boat show about 5-6 years ago, probably even longer. And they're talking about these millionaires' yachts, and they said the real trouble with them is the millionaires want everything on the yacht, and they're turning into a security nightmare because they're all electronic. And one day somebody's going to hack a super yacht, and I thought, "Ooh, that's a good idea." Then nobody wrote it.
If
So I
only
thought,
I'd heard
okay.
of that could have been the perfect third in my tech thriller series. Damn you, William Shaw, being at the boat show when I wasn't. Damn you.
It's also quite an interesting time for that to come out, I guess, with like.
Yeah, interesting and terrifying, really, because, thrillers are kind of an unreal world. That's part of what you're doing. You're kind of taking the reader to a place that they know might exist but doesn't. And then suddenly for it to become horribly real is a little worrying. And actually what I did is I quickly rewrote it, funnily enough. And I wrote the beginning and the end to make sure that it finishes just as the Ukraine war is starting. Because also our attitude to oligarchs and super yachts is becoming much more defined, isn't it?
By the day.
By the day. I mean, we used to tolerate them. And I can remember I went to the Mediterranean with my brother, and I was looking at all these things in port in Greece. And Greece had gone through 10 years of economic hell, and yet these millionaires had come and park in their marinas. And you're kind of thinking, why doesn't somebody just, throw things at them? We tolerated these people being so rich in our presence. And I think we've kind of had that now, haven't we?
Yeah.
I was certainly very much more aware of what might have gone into how those yachts came to be owned by those people in the first place. Yeah, absolutely. And this is another example of how this great genre that we write in, and there was me a minute ago saying, don't pigeonhole us, but now I'm about to happily sit in that box. But we can tackle the big issues and talk about the big stuff, can't we?
I just think why is it so popular? It's because that's what it does. It really does because we're always trying to find some way in which we can kill people. And therefore, we've got to make people believe we kill people. We actually encounter the real world in order to try and put the real world in so we can kill people. But actually, it gives us a really interesting view of the real world, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? We're thriller writers and crime writers look at the real world with, I think, a really interesting type of, a really interesting lens. And it means that it's a really powerful genre because it is the real world we're discussing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think there's always that sort of strange thing where, I hate to call anybody normal people, but people who aren't thriller writers will sit and have a conversation about something, and you're at the same table thinking, well, that's a bloody good way to kill someone. But when you say that at a dinner table, it sort of frosts the atmosphere somewhat.
Yeah. But, I was sort of like, it's interesting because I was doing a talk actually for a women's institute in Tunbridge Wells. And I said my grand theory about
that is the most quintessentially women's institute place that could ever exist.
and you'll find the story suits it rather well. And I was talking about how I think crime fiction is this great genre because it has the real world in it. And that's how you can frighten people. We want to read ghoulish things, but we get doubly frightened if we think it's a real world. And then I said, unfortunately, all this has gone, slightly tits up with the Thursday Murder Club, because that's a kind of, we're back into sort of fantasy world. And the faces of the Women's Institute of Tunbridge Wells turned very stony at that point. And they said, we don't like that book. I said, what? But it's a fantastic book. It's a great romp and things like that. No, he got things wrong. Because he mentioned a Waitrose in Tunbridge Wells, and there isn't one. And they were furious because he got that wrong, but also furious because there isn't a Waitrose in Tunbridge Wells, and they obviously deserve one.
When an author lives in his Chiswick bubble and he can't that not everywhere in the world has a Waitrose.
The entire fabric of the book fell apart for them at that point because they couldn't believe in it anymore. Because he'd put a Waitrose in Tunbridge Wells.
And arguably accounts for the number of one-star reviews he's had.
Yeah.
In that very
probably just IP addresses in one place.
Yeah.
I love
Outraged
how
of Tunbridge Wells.
I love how some reviews for police procedurals are like, oh, I didn't quite get the interview right or whatever, and that's his downfall.
Yeah. And that is fascinating that you mentioned that, the boomerang quality of that kind of book becoming very popular again. As it mentioned, as we're talking, actually, Sean, you and I are involved in a panel on Thursday night, aren't we? Where the question is, can writing murder ever really be cozy? Because it's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? Like my mum always talks, she watches Midsummer Murders, or she has them all taped on telly. And then, Well, you know, they're not taped.
70s.
Sorry, I'm still say it. I can't not say it. She has them all recorded on series length. There we go. I've wandered back into the 21st century. It's like she says, I'm just going to go and watch A Gentle Murder now. And like a little gentle murder. It's just mad to think of it in those terms, isn't it? But so, yeah, we're going to be discussing this very thing. In fact, why do you think, William, here's me mining for information before we do a panel, but why do you think it's come back round?
I think it's curiously come back around because it's like all the other things, it's never not been there.
Yes.
And like psychological fiction, it never really went away, but publishers stopped believing in it. And actually, that stuff's always there. And it's, so people who couldn't buy it would go back and they carried on reading Marjorie Allingham or something because it wasn't being published. And, Martin Edwards did lots of putting it back into print and in libraries and things like that. It was always there and it was always there to go. But then publishers thought, oh, we're having a terrible time. There's COVID and there's all these terrible things. People will want cozy crime. So the marketing went behind it as well. And so they tend to think in that way because they were either thinking we're going to want really escapist murderous crime or cozy crime, and they kind of all start running down that corridor all at once, and so suddenly it's the thing. But actually, people just like all sorts of books.
Yeah, and
I think it's fascinating that it never went out of popularity in Germany, for example, like their crimi category, which is the cozy crime rather than the hard-boiled or the thriller crime, has been monumentally successful and sells. Arguably, it sells cheek by jowl with the sort of Mills and Boon style romances, but it's seen as that. It's sort of mainstream, easy selling fodder, and it offends no one and it pleases everyone, and it does exactly just enough crime, just enough mystery, just enough. And a ton load of characterizations, which is what people want to be carried away with, rather than this is complex or terrifying or I have a lot of people who are going to say to me, well, I love your books, but they're very dark, and that's what people so lots of people do want dark, but as you say, William, in COVID times and war times and everything else, we still want to have the murder just without the hideous. Yeah,
and it's like if I'm feeling, if I've got flu or something like that, I'll go for PG Wodehouse. Do you know what I mean? We all have tips. That as well.
I do like a cup of tea.
But we all have different types of ourselves, don't we? That sometimes we just want to read something really sort of light and funny, and
something that fits. There's a book for every mood, isn't there?
Yeah.
And every occasion. I love it, and this is why I absolutely flipping love this stuff and this conversation and all this kind of thing and talking about it all. It's absolutely brilliant. On that, and if we talk about classical things, when reading your the Trawlerman is the latest in
that's right,
in that particular series, and I always just associated that style with just. It's such. I mean, that is such a. I'm holding up the Trawlerman here, listeners, and it's just such a classically executed copy of a book, and inside and out. And I thought it was like a perfect marriage of styles, William. It's with it's River Run, isn't it? And I always thought like such a wonderful mesh there of inside and out, because I always thought your style was just so classical and easy to read in crispness, and nothing was wasted, everything was just so direct and forthright, and I loved reading them. Absolutely love reading them. Can readers, did you have the same approach with Dead Rich?
Firstly, checks in the post, Rob, thank you very much.
No worries.
Did I have the same approach? Yes, I guess so. I just really like the fact that what crime does is teaches us to write really directly, but that doesn't mean you can't almost be experimental, but you've got to be direct, haven't you? Yes. Words of each word is twice as valuable in something like crime fiction. It has to carry so much. People always look at it this thing and they think, oh, that looks really simplistic, but it's not, is it? We go through sentences and we take out a lot of those bits that just are going to distract the reader from getting exactly the point you make. And so I really like writing in that style, and I think it's taught me a lot. Being around other crime writers, just having to know you have to connect with the reader. It doesn't always make you think about the reader's brain all the time. in a weird way. You don't indulge yourself in just thinking, wow, can I just be marvelous? It is about directness. What you're trying to do is you're going to put the story direct as you can into the reader's brain. And I think that gives you such a great sort of power of language if you're sort of continually thinking about that. Does that make any sense at all?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. But so while you were writing one in the morning and one in the afternoon, was it very much a question of, right, I'm going to like lock that part of me away, the morning part, and then, I mean, was it an easy thing to do?
But you know, I don't know about you, I don't plan books very well, and I tend to sort of have an idea. So the beginning of every book's a bit of a struggle for me because I don't know what I'm doing. But once I'm into it, and once I know the world, I can switch it on and it's fine. And so I was doing that in the afternoon. What I do is swap, because if I'm writing one book in the same day, I actually write really slowly in the afternoon because I've kind of done a bit of stuff. You know, the morning's quite good. But I found if I was doing two, it was like I had 2 mornings and I was re-energized, you know. Yeah, I haven't got back to doing it again yet, but I really want to, because I just found that I did more better words. And, you know, it's like, I mentioned Ellie Griffiths, who was inspired by it. She said a book takes as long as you've got to write it. And I think that's the thing, is because you can feel like you're doing your finals sometimes and actually just really do a lot of work to get it done. And so it was kind of like that, but it kind of made a really nice working day for me, because then you put one down. And I think it's always good to leave a book whenever it gets hard. The trouble is, if you've got a whole day, is you're then now going, oh God, what am I going to do with her in this scene? She's just there and I don't know what I'm doing. You just leave that and you go and write the other book. And in the morning, that problem might actually be fixed in that magic way that it sometimes is if you put it away, rather than spent all afternoon hammering away at it.
Did you ever find characters from one book knocking on the back of your brain whilst you were writing the other one? Were you able to compartmentalize?
I was able to compartmentalize, but I mean, I tend to write, you know, main characters of having quite ineffectual males. And I quite like that, because I quite like the male sort of dilemma, thinking you ought to be a hero, but you're a bit useless at it. And in both books, I had one of those, and I had to keep them apart.
Yeah,
more so in the thriller, actually. But you know, I do tend to write a lot of males who are a bit like me, indecisive and sort of find themselves in the wrong place,
doing their best, just
doing their best.
I don't know how many times I say that during the day here at home. I'm doing, and then it immediately goes, I'm doing it, Sybil. You know, we become full Basil Fawlty. My wife isn't called Sybil, by the
way. You're just there on your own as well.
Yeah, telling it to myself. Yeah, I must admit, because that you've given me a bit of a shot in the arm there, William, because I'm openly not openly, I'm not like going around telling everyone about that I'm struggling with my latest one, but it's because I've made it so clear that this next book is the final one in a trilogy, that this is it. It all ends here. I've made that clear. I get emails from people saying, please don't kill this person and don't kill that person. And, you know, and because I think now I'm in the mindset of killing them all, but
kill them all.
Really hope the FBI agent listening to my call is pleased with these nuggets I'm giving him. But it slowed me down, so I'm going to view it as 2 separate books now. It's the same book. I'm just going to view it as 2.
Oh, I like that. That's very clever.
Yeah. That's really helped me.
You know what you should do, Rob, is you should tease your readers by having all sorts of scenes where they all get on a bus or they all get on a plane. This is where he's going to kill them all. No. Yes, every character came together for that one barge ride. Actually, there's only so much bad stuff that can happen on a barge, really, isn't there? Well, I don't know. Is there? You've been to London.
Anyway.
Please, can I ask about because you had Breen and Tozer? Did they come first?
They did. I started. What happened is I was in a writers' group in Brighton, and there were like 5 of us, and 2 of us actually writing. And the other one was C.J. Sanson, the historical writer, and so he came out the bag very early on, being very successful because he's a brilliant writer. And I kind of thought, I'd really like to do something historical, but I can't make it as historical as Chris, because that would be cheating, and he's done that, and also he's a historian and I'm not. But I had been a music journalist for years and years and years, and I thought, there's sort of interesting, maybe you could do things around culture, you know, like around what was happening there and culturally. And maybe, you know, I always had this big thought that my my father kind of thought pop music was probably a good thing, but he didn't like any of it. You know, there was a huge generational divide. What if you have one character who's from one side of that line and the other one who really gets it? You know, somebody who really understands the Beatles and what's going on. Then you kind of think, oh, she's going to be the groovy 22-year-old policewoman, and he's going to be 33, because at 33 you were middle-aged in 1968, and you're actually just going to be a police officer for the rest of your life and retire at 60, whatever. And that was, you know, and I just thought that's such a nice combination, because it kind of was what was going on when I was growing up, that whole division between generations. So I set it in 1968. I started with the dead body behind Abbey Road Studios, and it kind of went on from there.
Yeah, and
I mean, like that, you know, your journalism career would have surely given you a ton of almost Theroux-esque experiences that that you could draw on for any.
It did, especially because I was into kind of a real kind of reportage thing where I'd be interested in writing about the fans as I was as the famous people. So I had all that sort of stuff. The only trouble is that real life is so strange compared to anything we write.
Yeah, and nobody bloody believes you.
No. I did used to write a column in the Observer for ages called The Small Ads, where I used to call people up and say, you've got a classified advert, back when they were classified adverts. What are you selling? And is there a story? Because my theory was that if you're selling something, there's some change going on in your life, and if you've got change, you've got a story. So what's the change?
Oh, that's so brilliant. That's so brilliant.
That's what lots of editors said it wasn't when I suggested it them. For
really?
Once a year, I used to take these ideas to editors of all the newspapers, and they'll go, "That's a terrible idea." And then it's like a stopped clock. You eventually find the one who said, "That's a brilliant idea." So yes. I did it. I only did it for about 3 or 4 years, but it just was so many bizarre stories, but they're all bizarre. And they're all kind of, very few of them was ones you could exploit, because, you know, I can remember ringing somebody up and they was selling something like a lawnmower. And he said, oh, I thought you were calling about the glass nose cone. What do you mean? He had a glass nose cone from a Trident missile that he was also selling, which was like part of the guidance system that he'd walked off with when he was in the military. And, you know, if you put that in a book, people think that's stretching it a little.
Yes, yes. That honestly is all. Yeah, I mean, oh gosh,
it would certainly bugger up the people who bought this also like this algorithm. So
yes,
modern sales websites.
Yes,
perfectly well rated for his glass nose.
Yeah, wow.
Why the jump to another series?
It was I kind of wanted to write something that was less urban, and part of that was actually sort of I wanted to do I was really interested that everybody was in fiction and non-fiction, people are doing a lot of nature writing, and I thought actually that's quite appropriate, because we are going to hell in a handbasket as a planet, and actually is there some way you can write about nature in crime? And so I thought I'm going to set it in a place which has a kind of weird natural history, which is Dungeness, and I wanted to keep that. I didn't want to make any preachy points about nature. I just wanted to have it there in that series, and I just thought, and at the time it's just something I really wanted to do, and I set it there because it has the most extraordinary thing. You know, Dungeness was the first RSPB nature reserve. The people who go there are a lot of the people who go there are ultra nature nerds. They know so much, and I just thought that might be an interestingly different thing, and it means I can just drop in little sort of stories like that, and it just keeps me satisfied, really. But also the thing about Dungeness is it's really precarious as a landscape. There's a nuclear power station there. You know, people live in huts there, and I've got to know a few of them since. And every winter, when it's like this last winter, and there's winds that go on forever, you just kind of think, is Dungeness actually just going to disappear under the waves? And, you know, it's got that sense of impermanence that I think the whole planet has now. And so it was a really nice milieu.
I mean, it's amazing you say that, William, about that sense of impermanence, because only today, I live in Warrington. Only today, the Warrington Guardian has done an article of the 10 places in Warrington that will be underwater in 30 years. we're 30 miles from the coast here. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. That is the circumstances in which we're living at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, and I thought, you know, it is a genre that can do anything, like we've been saying. You know, you can put anything in there, but as long as you respect the reader, and it's not just like, I'm going to write a preachy book about global warming, and hopefully nobody thinks these books are about global warming. But it's kind of, I just think that's another anxiety in the book, that you kind of know you're living in a landscape that's slightly well, I mean, that Romney Marsh and Dungeness aren't going to be there in you know, by the end of the next century, this century, whatever, who knows? But, you know, it's highly plausible they won't be.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy to think we're in those ways. And there was you've mentioned Ellie Griffiths a couple of times, and Ellie's just absolutely wonderful. We've been lucky enough to spend time with her on here, but in real life as well. She's just a star. But the similarities with her setting as well, in Norfolk, I find both of those series so comforting, in that sense. The setting gives me comfort. I really enjoy it.
And isn't that sort of thing? But we kind of read it for dead bodies, but we also read it to be taken somewhere else, don't we? Whether it's, to a mean street,
Yes.
grim city somewhere, but we do want to be somewhere else when we're in that sort of place. And I think that's the great thing. And writers who do something like her Norfolk is just in your head instantly.
It is, yeah.
I think it's really good,
Yeah, I get that feeling with CJ Box's Wyoming as well. Once a year, I love going to his Wyoming and hanging out with Joe Pickett and his family and all that kind of stuff. And these books from all three authors, yourself included there, they're like, what are they? Calendar events, like, oh, I get to go and hang out with those people again, like that kind of thing. It's really great.
And it is that thing that, I've just had a complete brain blank. Rebus, Ian Rankin. Thank you. Thank you, brain. You saved me there. Said that like if you want to find out about a place, go and read a crime novel set there. And I do think that it's got that whole sort of stuff. I've just been reading The Field by Erin Young, which is coming out soon, and it's set in Iowa. And you kind of think, she lives down the road from me. What's she doing writing about Iowa? But she's been there a lot just to write these books. And it's sort of like such a great description of an American landscape that's in deep, deep trouble. It's wonderful.
It's fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
And do you go regularly to Dungeness to sort of soak up the atmosphere?
Quite regularly. I mean, I have to say, when I wrote the first one, I was kind of winging it. I think we do that a bit as well, because, the great thing about Dungeness is at the point when I wrote the first one, it wasn't on Google Maps because it's a private estate and they wouldn't let anybody photograph it. So you couldn't go around on Google Maps. You did have to go there for a bit. But I've got to know some of the people there more since, and they've gone, oh, you shouldn't have. In the Birdwatch, I described it as bleak. And I've been given a lot of grief about calling it bleak. In the Birdwatch, I also didn't mention the light railway, and one of the very first Amazon reviews I got was saying this guy doesn't really know it because he didn't mention the light railway there. I don't know if there's a lovely little light railway generally run by these quite large men, so it makes it look doubly outsized. And, it's a big thing there. But, of course, I didn't mention it because if you put a light railway in the book and you hadn't been to Dungeness, you're going to think I'm going to try and kill somebody with a very small train.
Exactly. You're either suffering from your very own Waitrose moment, or you've used a light railway as Chekhov's gun, and you're not going to kill anyone with it.
Exactly. So. I mean, people are going to expect somebody to be run over, strapped to the railway lines, whereas actually that train would probably give you a really nasty bruise.
Unless one of the large men was wielding it like a
actually somebody has. I said this, and somebody has been killed by it apparently. So
well, it's not joked about then.
No, and this is another example of life will, life. Don't worry, life will come and do the wacky for you. And do the unbelievable for you. Sorry. No, I'm not going to. I'll have to do it now. Won't I? But, we're talking about stories that just you couldn't believe. This is a tangent, and we're going to have to take this out. I think. I don't know what's going on here. But anyway, I was talking.
That's Rob volunteering to edit this episode.
Yes, it is basically. No, I was in the pub and I saw someone who said, "Oh, have you heard about we'll call him well, he's actually a copper, so we'll call him John the Copper because you heard about John the Copper?" I was like, "No, is he all right?" He said, "Oh, dear, it's bad do." He took a day off to do some MDF flooring at home. Now, if we did this in a crime book, there's no way any of us would get away with this. Took a day off, but he spent the whole day mucking about and didn't actually do the flooring. His wife was due home in a couple of hours' time, so he thought, "Oh, heck, I better crack on." Started doing it, and as he's going away, he got his jumper snagged in the circular saw, caught into it, and he tried to carry on, but he felt something was off, and he turned around and he saw a hand on the floor, and like oh, whose hand is that? And he hadn't snagged the thing; it just gone clean through. And he sat on the sofa, and his wife came home and found him there, and lo and behold, they reattached the hand. I don't think he's going to be a concert pianist anytime soon, but John the Copper is all right. And It's mad. If we put that in a book, there's no way.
It's a different take on the long arm of the Lord.
It really is.
You've got to leave that in for that joke alone.
It really have. We really have. So this past week, since I was told that, like, I'm still coming to terms with it. You know, like, you imagine. I mean, any of that? Could you imagine? I don't. Anyway, right. Sorry. Books. That's what we're here for.
Books and a few DIY tips.
A few. Yes. Don't.
Do you know what? A true fact. There's 87,000 DIY injuries a year in the UK.
I'm not surprised.
And yet it still hasn't got a genre behind it, you know. And so maybe if we can bring all these things back, maybe we. Sorry.
Yes.
Just holding up Death of a Painter there.
Painter by Matthew Ross.
That definitely covers that. Well, yeah.
So there we go. We crime fiction's dead. We're going to have DIY injury fiction from now on.
Speaking of genres,
if it's all as unbelievable as John the Copper's missing arm,
hand, you know. Anyway, right, we have to move on from that because I've just still got so many questions. I'm just going to keep banging on about it.
Did they fix his jumper?
Of all the questions, no.
His wife cut her hand off on the sewing machine later that day.
Yeah, it just carried on. Just hands everywhere. Oh, right. Yes. Genre. Right. So we came up with a new genre just then. I know we've said we don't like being popped into one, but you went ahead, William, and just said, right, I'm not happy. You know, I'm not content with just doing one thing. I want to do another crack at another part of the literary industry. If you could just go ahead and do that again and pick anything, any genre, any style, where would you go and why?
Wow. Do you know what the hardest thing to do would be to write? And I'm so in awe of anybody who can do it, and I couldn't do it. Is humorous crime. You know, I just think it's really hard to do, and there are a few people who do it. And obviously, Mick Herron's the outstanding name for that. But I just think humor is really underrated it's just, you've got to be such a technician to make things funny, haven't you? And you've got to think you're not funny to make it funny. Do you know what I mean? Comedians are amazing how they can, you know, anybody trying to be funny is not funny.
Yes.
Well, that Matthew Ross that I just showed you, he started out writing comedy for stand-up comedians, and wrote for a lot of big names, but he was also a builder, and then combined those two things into making a builder into the character. And honestly, it's not hugely crimey. There's a lot of stuff that goes down in it, but my God, it's funny.
It's very funny.
Hard to do.
But funny books are really hard to write these days. Do you know what I mean? You kind of think there used to be a lot of humorous books out there, and actually, I think we've got harder to please in it.
Yeah, they're also strangely hard to sell for exactly that reason.
Yeah,
I think
publishers
find it much easier to review something that's thrilling or terrifying or page turning or whatever, but something that just makes you go.
But I like that. I like to be sort of confounded as a reader a little bit, like, oh God, I shouldn't be laughing, but I am laughing. You know what I mean? That kind of balance is so hard to strike.
And I suspect we all do this, don't we? I mean, like, actually, humor in the darkest books is really good and really necessary. And it's good to always have something that's really funny before you kill somebody.
Yes, absolutely. And as you mentioned, Mick Herron, it's really pleasing to see that there's still a market for fart jokes.
Yeah.
So yeah,
we can all agree on that.
It's like the sorbet of crime thriller, isn't it? Between courses.
Have you watched Slow Horses, the series?
Not yet. I'm saving it up.
It's very good.
It's very bingeable. I think you've done the right thing, William. It's an all-in-one go thing. I've had to do the same. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many more questions I want to ask here, but do we have anything from online at all, Chris?
No, I think I put it out too late, so we didn't get any. But if I could ask a question,
you go for it, man, and I'll check Twitter and see whether we had any takers. But you,
thank you. We talked about the sort of setting of your past books, but with Dead Rich, what sort of research or things went into the writing of that?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is that super yachts are actually fantastically secretive, and people have to sign incredibly elaborate non-disclosure to go on them, which is great because you can make it all up.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, you kind of imagine it. So I talked to sort of a couple of sea captains and some sort of those sort of things to try and get the technical details, of which there's many because it's a thriller, right? And then the other thing, it was lockdown, so I was writing in the Caribbean, because you just had to imagine it. And actually, it was quite liberating not to be, because I do a lot of research when I can. It's quite liberating not to be able to do that. I mean, with the Trawlerman, like I went out on trawlers and did all that stuff. I was thinking, great, I'll go out to the Caribbean, but I didn't. And actually, so I did a lot of imagining and trying to make that up. And you know, we do also, you know, it's quite good to remember if you're a research-based writer that you can also make stuff up. And super yachts, you really can make it up on, because not only is there so much secrecy about them that no one can actually contradict you if you decide to put, you know, a 15 helicopter pads, a jacuzzi, and a cruise missile on your super yacht. There probably might be one that has that anyway, you know, because they're all so mad. You know,
there'll be one mad multi-billionaire that will do that.
There's glass bottom swimming pools. There's, you know, everything you want in them. And I kind of invented a kind of ship's lockup that was also a safe room, and actually kind of that's a bit interesting. And I spoke to one person who said that's the stupidest bit of design ever, because you know what's going to happen, don't you? And of course it does happen in my book, but he says I wouldn't put it past a millionaire asking for it, so go ahead.
Yeah, there is that sensation, isn't there, with when money is absolutely no object whatsoever, that sense is a secondary, or common sense I should say, is a secondary. I used to know a chap who did bespoke swimming pools for Premier League footballers, and he said that because money was no object, he said it was just bonkers.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
So many of them were originally shaped like a disguised cock and balls. Because you'd imagine that most footballers haven't really got beyond, you know, just doodling and make it look like that.
Well, I'm afraid I similarly have signed many NDAs on the topic of. No, but it was definitely a question of, right, we'll have the diamond encrusted little mosaic tiles at the bottom, and then the next week, like, no, I don't fancy them. Let's get them out and we'll get another, you know, we'll get something else in there. It's crazy.
When I was doing my research, I kept finding the story about this gold-plated super yacht, and it's been reported in some of the, you know, Business Insider and everything's like that, about the most expensive super yacht by meterage compared to, like, Abramovich is the most expensive, but, you know, there's this other one, is this gold super yacht, and everyone's like, wow, this is amazing. It doesn't exist. It never existed. Somebody wrote it as a joke and it got taken seriously, and now it keeps going there because it might exist. So there you go.
Like the Bigfoot of the yachting, the super yacht community.
My mind's sitting there going, but that would make it a lot heavier, surely. Then.
Yes.
Yes.
And lighter.
And the designer would go, well, obviously no objects, sir.
Yes,
it does exist. It's just at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah. One thing is about this situation, that there's a lot of designers who've been taking a lot of money from these people who are probably thinking, oh crap, that's my income gone for the next decade. Because they've just, you know, there's people in Germany and places like that who've been building these absolutely insane boats.
Speaking of Germany, we have a question from Beatfrets, who asks, any further German translations of your books? They sadly stopped at Surkamp Verlag.
They did. No, not at the moment. I'm really hoping this thriller will be something that kind of gets that going again. And I think, you know, there's part of the thing is that I think both Germany and America, which were great to buy places, finding they've kind of got enough British procedurals at the moment. And I think they've kind of, their publishers are doing that. Oh, we can't have any more of those sort of things, even if readers want them. So it's very frustrating, because you can, these days, you know, like you get readers saying, but I know it's out and I can't get it. Whereas before they're in blissful ignorance, but now books go everywhere electronically. So they just really frustrated when you can't get them, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I'm a bit annoyed because it was great fun having books out in Germany.
Yeah. I mean, I Beatfrets, I'll tell you, I'll pop you a message and say your question was answered on the podcast, but it's not good news yet. Sorry, I've just want to highlight that my son has just bought me in a plate of snacks, which is
healthy snacks.
I know, an apple, a watermelon, and some beef Monster Munch.
I like the way, if you couldn't see that, he just took a little sniff just to ascertain the flavour first.
It looks,
salt and vinegar.
Yeah, it looks kind of. It's going to be interesting, I think.
Looks like it's designed by a toddler.
Yes, and well, he is 4.
Yeah.
Yes, it wasn't my
I'd say that-
22-year-old son just walked in and handed me this snack. Ah, dear
Oh,
me.
bless him.
I'm disappointed they're not pickled onion Monster Mash, for those are the king of Monster Mash.
No, they're beefy, all right. They're the real deal sitting over there.
It's a shame.
Yes.
But at least you've got your cleansing watermelon too.
Yes. And the equally cleansing fart gags from Mick Herron on my shelf over there. Is it game time, Chris?
It can be.
I'm looking I was looking at the our little timer. We have our little checklist of things to tick off, William, you see.
So we play a game every week, William, where I've looked at someone who has given you a 1-star review. We don't talk about that, but we do look at what else they have reviewed. So I've picked 2 items from this person, and you have to tell me whether they give it 1 star or 5 star.
Excellent. I like that.
So the first item is a radiator valve, to like to sort of cover the top bit so you can twist it. Made by Merryway. I don't know if that.
Oh, Merryway
sways
was.
things.
Merryway, yeah. That's a 1 star.
A 1's any reason?
Well, because they're really annoying things to fit. And if it's going to complain about a book saying something like, it didn't download on my Kindle first, I'm guessing it's probably that sort of person, they're going to have a lot of trouble with radiator fittings.
Okay.
Especially in Merryway. It's a tricky story if ever there was one.
Sean, what are you saying?
I'm gonna go opposite and say a 5 star on the basis that anybody attempting their own radiator repairs clearly isn't an avid literary fan.
John the Copper does it all the time.
Well, look at John the Copper. Anyway, who says John the Copper reads a book?
I can't wait to tell John the Copper he's famous. I can't wait for his antics.
I'm saying 5 stars.
5. And Rob?
I'm going to go 5 as well. I think he absolutely flipping loves them. I think he's a collector of rare radiator appendages. So, yeah.
Okay. William, you take the point here. It's 1 star. In capital letters, not universal.
You were right for the reason as well.
And then the review, not universal, repeated. There is a washer, in inverted commas, inside the cap, which has a round hole in it. My valve is rectangular. I'll have to mackle to make it fit.
At least he knows how to mackle.
Hope he didn't cut his hand off mackling.
I mean, what is mackle? Does anyone know?
I assume
every day's a school day.
Okay,
right.
We've all got to use it in our next book.
Yes, that's a deal. Yes, it's an absolute deal. Mackle.
Mackle.
Can you use it like sort of like like in like dialect, like?
Oh, it's mackle fishing.
Yeah, I was mackle fishing.
I was mackled last night.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
I love it.
The second item, and I mean this person's life, right? So they're fixing their own radiator. They've bought a dog pram.
Oh, dear.
Slash cat. So I don't know what they're. Oh no, I do know that they're using it for from the review. So it's a dog pram. Looks like a child's pram, but without the little harness for your leg, I guess. So, Sean, let's go with you. What are you saying?
I think that's going to be a 1 star on the basis that it probably only fits a cat.
Okay.
And their dog doesn't fit it.
Yeah.
Is a dog like Will Dean's massive St. Bernard? And they really needed a trailer.
Yeah.
It's a Ukrainian tractor job.
Yes.
Rob, what are you saying?
This is so difficult. Yeah, I think it's probably one of those. It's a case of mistaken size. 1 star.
1 star.
Yeah.
Radio. William?
I feel there's nowhere to go here for me but say 5 star. and his dog's never been so happy.
Okay. Well, William is the runaway winner for today.
Oh,
Excellent product, fabulous for the money. My elderly doggo with dodgy legs loves it. Husband refuses to go near it and walks 10 paces behind. Result.
I might be accused of writing my own Amazon reviews at this point, mightn't I?
I think you certainly know your audience, even the ones that
The ones who hate me.
I will say she did not enjoy many, if any, books that she read.
I've got the cut of her jib. I know her
You
sort.
worked her out.
she's too busy mackling away at her radiator.
Hang on, was it the same person?
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's the point of the game, Rob.
She's a treasure trove of hers.
I'm so sorry. I'm sometimes like irredeemably dense, and
we have only been playing this.
That's
game
a character
for
sketch in just a few words, isn't it?
It is. 92 episodes in, and the penny finally dropped. Oh well,
Wait a
jolly
minute.
D. Hang on a jolly minute. Oh dear. So we usually like to ask, what are you reading at the minute, William?
I'm just actually reading Dorothy Coombson's Her Other Husband, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. I think it's the best book she's written, actually.
She's brilliant,
that I've read.
isn't she?
And it's just very slyly funny so far. I suspect it's not going to be funny for very much longer because bad things are happening. But it's it's one of those advanced copies, and you kind of think, oh god. And I do tend to think, oh god, I've got to catch up with these advanced copies, and I feel a little grim about it. And it's a real pleasure when you think, oh, I'm really enjoying this.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Chris, what are you reading at the minute?
I am on book 6, I think now, of the Ben Aronovich Rivers of London series.
Awesome.
I'm very, very late to them. We interviewed him probably about a month ago, and I'd had them on my shelf, the first 6, and I hadn't got to them, and so I read the first one and I loved it, so I literally cannot put them down. So I've just started number 6. Great series.
Man, you are flying through those as well. That is,
I really can't stop, and I've asked for the next 2 for my birthday next week, so I'm
nice,
hoping
man.
my wife has listened to my little hints. My Father Dougal style draped over the house.
And Sean, what are you reading at the minute? Are you
I
still
am still,
deep in submissions?
Yeah, so we're just approaching 300 short story submissions for our anthology, which we've got to select 25. So it's really, really tough. Our long list is ranking up towards the 100. So there's some excellent short story work out there, and it's just a pleasure. I read a good few every day whilst everything else is going on. But yeah, there's some excellent stuff there, and quite refreshing because they're very different, each of them. It's anything so long as it's in the crime, any subgenre of crime. So there's quite a range of things going on. It's brilliant. It's great.
Much respect. I couldn't even begin to write a crime short story. I think
it's
it's a really, really hard form, isn't it, to get right?
Yeah.
And some of them, when they do, there's quite a few people who sort of, it's clearly an excerpt of a bigger story, and you just go away and write the bigger story. That's fine. It has its length, but some people are clearly masters of that art because it's everything, but it's in 4,500 words.
It's a craft all by itself, isn't it? That.
Yeah. It's really tough.
It's a shame there's not a bigger market for it, actually. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of, it's we're not very good at reading short stories in Britain.
No, but I think there have been some cracking anthologies in the last sort of 3 or 4 years that do well, and they do well for. It's quite nice when you can do a mix of household names and emerging authors in the same book, and just and let those voices rub against each other in the same spaces. I think I've always quite enjoyed that. So I hope hopefully it'll fly, but either way, they're still bloody good stories. So.
Yeah. I know it's a brilliant. It's brilliant, and Steve Golds is your editor.
The other editor on that.
Yeah, and having his expert eye on it, that is, yeah.
He's just it's really difficult with Steve because he just goes, look at this one, look at this one. You're like, choose them, Steve. We've got to choose. They're all brilliant. I get that.
Well, I look forward to the Magna Carta of anthologies.
I'm going to have to reshape the Red Dog sales thing to be like one of those Encyclopedia Britannica salesmen.
Yes, yeah.
Just go knocking door to door with my car boot full of 26 volumes of crime anthologies.
Awesome.
Not a bad idea, actually. Am I right?
It's not actually. Yeah, get that down. Get that down. For myself, I'm currently reading The Next Witness by Kirsten Petras. Kirsten is a writer who is a voice on the Dark Waters podcast, and this new one is it's coming out from Cinnabar Moth Publishing in America, and it's sort of like this darkly dystopian. It's about someone who becomes like a figurehead without actually meaning to be. It's really, really interesting, but set in like a near future that is sort of painfully real to the touch and ever more real with every horrible passing day. And so it's got that sense of scaring me quite a bit. At the same time, like I can't look away, but it's really, really good. So yeah, that's I think that's out in May. So yeah, keep an eye out for it. Yeah, and William, is there anyone doing, like, we're such a positive community, aren't we? You know, the crime community. But who's doing great work at the minute that you think other people should be reading?
Who's doing great work? Well, Leslie Thompson's got a new one that I'm going to read because it's supposed to be really good. I can't even remember the title right now. I'm just always knocked back by the fact that people you think are in one sort of genre, one groove, can do something else, like Mark Billingham, Rabbit Hole, which I just thought was a superb book. Just doing something completely different suddenly. Who Brilliant. Else? You know, I'm looking through my huge pile. I mentioned before. I mentioned that debut by and a writer who's written under the name Erin Young. She's now writing Erin. Is it Erin Young? Her new name. That's right. Erin Young's Robin Young was her previous name. Erin Young's a new name. The Field. It's just really, really, really great procedural. It's really good, really fantastic characters, really tight description of things, very emotional, and I really like that. I really soaked that book up. It's one of those ones where you just sort of like you've decided to go into the entire world she's giving you, and I love that.
That is, I've just literally just added that to the to the pile myself there as we've been talking.
That's the trouble. There's a lot in there,
but it's great, isn't it? Though, like because we're readers, aren't we? We just want to read everything, at the end of the day.
But I'm quite a slow reader. I don't know about you lot. You sound like you're. I find I'm. I thought I was quite fast until I sort of started hanging out with other writers who can happily read a book a week. It takes me a long time.
No, I'm a slow reader as well. I have to read a lot of submissions for work, but as the guys know, I tend to, while I'm designing covers or formatting or doing something else, the computer reads them to me. And if something read to you in an absolutely hideous robotic computer voice is still grabbing your attention, it's a submission that's worth going for. Yeah. It doesn't make for the best experience for the poor writer. I do go back and read the good ones.
And while we have you, William, it would be absolutely remiss of us not to congratulate you on the Gold Dagger longlisting for the Trawlerman.
Isn't that lovely?
Just congratulations. It's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, and it's a really, really, really brilliant long list as well. That's fantastic.
It's great. It's a great list. Yeah. Woe betide the person who's got to make any selections there.
Yeah. It's but it's great, isn't it? It's lovely because it is just very nice to have that sort of reassurance. Keeps the publishers happy that they haven't made a terrible mistake.
That's one way of looking at it.
And could you let us? I mean, did you have any idea?
No, none at all. No, and actually, I'm on the committee of the CWA partly because I'm it's not a great secret. I find the CWA incredibly frustrating organisation. I've always moaned about it, so I thought I ought to join the committee. And the one thing that is really, really impressive about the CWA, is the prize structure. It's really well secretively done. I mean, occasionally they'll pick somebody like that, and you kind of think, well, that we knew that was coming. But they have a mechanism which that's purely coincidence, and it's quite weird because I don't necessarily agree with everybody they choose, but actually you're never going to agree with
No,
the
impossible.
judges choosing it. But actually it's a really robust sort of structure of how they keep it really, really secret. And there's, so they have these embarrassing conversations where they say, oh, they want somebody like Ellie Griffiths to be on stage helping present the awards. And they think, well, what if she's got an award? And they think, well, that'd be really interesting. She won't know. Do you know what I mean? If she was, because they do keep it that tight, and I'm really impressed by that. I think it's really good.
Great.
Because prizes are always there's this kind of corruption in all prizes, isn't there? Because you end out being mates with somebody like that. However big a world we're in, it's also quite a small world, and you've always got to try and fight against that. And I do think, there've been a few decisions I haven't really liked, and I've thought that doesn't reflect really well on how it looks, but that's perception, not reality in a weird way. Do you get what I'm on about?
I think absolutely.
I think they're really, really conscientious. They read a ton of books and they read it very carefully, and they'll look really exhausted at the end of it, which is what judges should be like, isn't it?
Yeah, that's that little peek behind the curtain. Because obviously, I mean, this is, it's every crime writer's dream to be involved in a daggers conversation, isn't it? So it's very interesting to hear behind the curtain there. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'm expecting disappointment. That's the way we should always go into being longlisted, because there's so many other people who really, really do deserve that. Well, I mean, like Mark Billingham's never won a dagger, and that's crazy.
That is insane. Yeah. Gosh. Well, absolute best of luck. It's a fabulous book as well, The Trawlerman, William.
Thank you very, very kindly.
Yeah, it's great, and wonderful to see the right things get recognised as well. I love that.
Thank you.
Oh, marvelous. How much did you pay, Rob, for the I feel like I'm missing out on a revenue stream here.
No, William's coming with me we've agreed to settle up in the pub with John the Copper later on.
Little backhander.
Oh,
I thought he'd be putting his hand in his pocket.
Right, this all writes itself. This is great.
Who said comedy and crime was not a thing? Right, on that delightful note, thank you so much, William, for joining us.
Thank you, what a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been brilliant to meet you, William, and all the best for absolutely everything. Hope Dead Rich flies.
Thank you very much,
and hope the Trawlerman wins.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Rob.
I'm Simon.
And I'm James.
We want to talk about those movies. Those supposedly bad movies. Those movies that bombed.
To see if they weren't that bad after all, join us every other Tuesday on the For Your Reconsideration podcast, part of the Pod Dojo podcast network.
You can catch us on iTunes, Spotify, and all your usual podcast apps.
And it won't cost you a solitary bean, mate.
It's like it's free.
It's just like it's free.